Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to get out of pocket. Breaking news today on Out of Pocket, live on the Boom Broadcasting YouTube channel. If you're watching us right now, you see that the Las Vegas Raiders broke news today that they have fired Antonio Pierce, their head coach, after one full season with the team at a 4-13 record. Now, I have some opinions on this, and yesterday I was joined by Aaron Schneider and Cody Johnson from Drew Code Sports Talk. Aaron, the host of the Gridiron Address. And Aaron talked a little bit on Sunday, and we talked yesterday about coaches who could be fired. Cody, as a Raiders fan, there was a report that the Raiders were staying put with Antonio Pierce. And he was like, yeah, it makes sense. You only give him one full year. And then 24 hours later, there's a change of heart, and Antonio Pierce is no longer the Las Vegas Raiders head coach. Now, I had a huge show planned today, but I got to give the Raiders a piece of my mind right here, because I'm good friends with Cody. If you guys aren't subscribed to Drew Code Sports Talk on YouTube, after today's show, go follow them, subscribe to them. They do really good stuff. Cody and Drew do. Cody's a Raiders fan. Now, I don't always root for my friends and their teams, okay? And there's sometimes I wish the Raiders would just stay in purgatory right here. But speaking of Drew Code Sports Talk, Cody's saying sad day to be a Raiders fan. And I'll tell you why this is a sad day. Now, coaches get fired all the time. Yesterday was Black Monday. So we expect a huge laundry list of coaches fired. And we didn't really get a lot of head coaches fired over the last 24, 48 hours. Usually there's like 7, 8, sometimes 9 teams who are looking for a new head coach. And when we were off the air yesterday, we didn't expect the Raiders to, because they had committed to Antonio Pierce for a second season. Now, I want to lay the foundation for you right here of Antonio Pierce. Yes, he went 4-13 in the AFC West this year. Okay? The other 3 AFC West teams, the Chargers, Broncos, and back-to-back defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs, all made the playoffs. Okay? The Raiders didn't have the easiest schedule. Let me tell you, other than 3 division teams making the playoffs, okay? So all of a sudden there you have 6 losses right out the gate. Let's run the list of who else they played this year. They played the Pittsburgh Steelers. Oh, a playoff team. They played the LA Rams. Oh, a playoff team. They played the Cincinnati Bengals, who were on the cusp of coming back and making the playoffs. They ended the year on a 5-game win streak that was tied with Washington for the best in the NFL to end the year. You have the Miami Dolphins. Okay, it's on the road. I don't entirely upset the Raiders fans for losing that game. A coast-to-coast game's never easy. Oh, and then you have Tampa on the East Coast, a playoff team. Atlanta, who was contending for the NFC South. So they were a borderline playoff team. So the Raiders, they didn't have cupcakes on their schedule. The only cupcake you could make the case for is the Carolina Panthers in week 3. And that was a week after the Raiders went to Baltimore and beat, guess what, a playoff caliber team in the Baltimore Ravens. So to say that Antonio Pierce at 4-13 with the roster that he had, let's take a deep look into this Vegas Raiders roster. Okay, you could tell me, okay, you have Brock Bowers, right? Brock Bowers, he's a good rookie tight end. He honestly should be in contention for Offensive Rookie of the Year. But who do you have surrounding him on offense? You had the Devontae Adams scandal. Devontae just wanted to go to New York and play with his buddy. You had Jacoby Myers, who helped some fantasy football teams out a little bit. Running back, who'd you have? Amir Abdullah, Alexander Madison. You guys let Josh Jacobs walk to Green Bay in free agency. At quarterback, you had Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell or Desmond Ridder. Okay, cool. defensively, you didn't have much either. Christian Wilkins gets hurt. Max Crosby gets hurt, and so on and so forth. The fact that the Raiders were not patient enough with Antonio Pierce shows what state this organization is in. And I don't want to upset Cody from Drew Code Sports Talk any more than he really is, because let's look. The last time the Vegas Raiders won the AFC West, and mind you, they placed second last year after Antonio Pierce took over for Josh McDaniels, who was incompetent in his own right. And the Raiders were able to advance and get the second place in the AFC West behind the Kansas City Chiefs last year, just 12 months ago, taking over mid-year. So you give them a full offseason. Yeah, it's 4-13, but look at the roster you gave him. As I mentioned, the Raiders haven't won this AFC West since 2002, where the Raiders actually made it to the Super Bowl and lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers back in 2002. Bill Callahan was the head coach. Let me take you on a trip, because from 2003 all the way to 2015, they didn't finish higher than third in their own division. And they went through Norv Turner, who lasted a couple years, Art Shell, who lasted 1 year. Then you get your Jamarcus Russell. And then you have Lane Kiffin, who lasts like 1 year and 4 games. And then you switch to Tom Cable for 2.5 years. And then you have Hugh Jackson in for a year. And then you have Dennis Allen for about 2 years and 4 games. And then you make a in-season change for Tony Soprano, and you don't bring him back because he went 3-9. And then Jack Del Rio seemed to have the most consistency there from 2015 to 2017. He had a playoff appearance, 12-4, but after the team finished 6-10, guess what? Jack Del Rio, you're gone. 2018, you go back to John Gruden. And John Gruden looked like he was doing fine until some other stuff on the field, off the field, kind of hurt his case. He's fired 5 games into the 2021 season. Rich Bisaccia, the special teams coordinator, takes over, gets this team to the playoffs, and loses to the Bengals in the wild card round. And then you have Josh McDaniels for about a season and a half, and then you let Antonio Pierce take over. He finishes above 500 as the interim head coach, and you bring him back this year because you saw players were playing hard for him, and you decide, actually, you know what? We're just going to let him go, right? We're going to let him go. I mean, this is what upsets me with whether it's fans, whether it's impatient organizations. You guys want a quick fix. There's been some talent. There has been some talent in Las Vegas. There's been some talent in Oakland. You look at Max Crosby, one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. You look at Derek Carr, and they had at one point Derek Carr, Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, and they couldn't do anything. Why? Because they can't keep a coach. They're not allowing a guy like Antonio Pierce, who has the locker room behind him. They're not allowing him to actually, hey, this will take time. This will take time to rebuild. You guys gave me Gardner Minshew, Desmond Ridder, and Aiden O'Connell as my head coach. What do you expect? You strip off my number 1 wide receiver, a top 10 receiver in the NFL, and Devontae Adams. What do you expect? I'm in a division with Jim Harbaugh and the Los Angeles Chargers. Jim Harbaugh has turned every team around that he's been at. You put him in a division with Sean Payton, who finally got his guy in Bo Nix. And by the way, 2 of those teams, top 2 defenses in the NFL. And then you have the back-to-back defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. You're not winning the AFC West. And with the competition that your other organizations have went after, you're not going to beat the Broncos, who have retooled at head coaching quarterback and have retooled that defense. You're not going to beat the LA Chargers, who ended up having Jim Harbaugh. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And Daniel Capps joining us, a Raiders fan himself. Doesn't matter who the new head coach will be, because if he fails, Nation will call for him to be fired. Exactly. And I'm glad this is in all caps because Raiders fans should be upset. I am not a Raiders fan. You look at the back and I'm a Cowboys fan, but I'm a little upset for Las Vegas Raiders fans. And Drew Code Sports Talk, great point. Raider Nation needs to not be so quick to hate on your guys because if you look, and this is where I'll draw a comparison very briefly to the Cowboys and the Raiders. The Cowboys, they take way too long on their head coaches. Jason Garrett should not have lasted after his back-to-back 8-8 seasons, barely missing the playoffs. Like, they shouldn't have lasted that long. But are you telling me you're going to give up on a guy who actually had the locker room playing for him, and it wasn't even a talented locker room? You need to start looking inwardly, front office, rather than trying to point blame at head coach. Because guess what? We have an NFL draft coming up this spring. The Las Vegas Raiders weren't good this year. They were 4-13. So you know what? The Las Vegas Raiders are going pick 6th. And unless they make all these moves and trade all this draft capital to move up, they're probably going to miss out on Shedeur Sanders. They're probably going to miss out on Cam Ward. And you're going to have to settle for somebody else. And this roster, the way it's set up, it is not ready to compete. The Las Vegas Raiders roster is not ready to compete. It is years away. And every time you make a head coaching change, you make a change to a team's philosophy, their system, and no matter how many talent you draft young, no matter who is quarterback next year, they're going to have to learn a brand new system. They're going to have to learn a brand new system. And the Raiders front office has set this team up to fail. And guys, I don't know how Raiders fans are doing it right now, because if I was them, I would be very upset. If you missed the breaking news, Antonio Pierce fired by the Las Vegas Raiders after a 4-13 season, his lone full year as the Raiders head coach. And I do not agree with this call. Who else are you going to go get who wants to go coach for the Las Vegas Raiders, knowing I could try my best and I could look at this division and all the competition, but I'm not going to have a chance to actually rebuild this squad? It's ridiculous, guys. It's legitimately ridiculous. And that's where Raiders fans are today. But I want to tell you guys what we have in store for you. Before we heard the breaking news of Antonio Pierce being fired by the Las Vegas Raiders, I had made a huge idea. If you guys have been following Outta Pocket, every Tuesday we drop our top quarter rankings, which means the top quarter in terms of 32 NFL teams is 8 teams. I give you my top 8 NFL teams week in, week out. And now we're down to only 14 teams in the NFL. And so I was like, let's expand these top quarter rankings and make these the top playoff rankings. And so not only are you going to hear my top 8 teams still remaining in the playoff picture, but you are going to hear my top 14 teams in the playoffs. Now, there's a lot that went into these rankings, okay? First and foremost, who are they playing opening week? How did they end the year? Is their team built for the playoffs and a deep run to potentially a Lombardi trophy? So a lot of thought had went into these. And so I can't wait to share these with you guys right now on Outta Pocket. So if you guys are joining us for the first time, Boom Broadcasting gives you a bunch of content. Sports, football, basketball, baseball. We have a baseball podcast. We have professional wrestling content. If you guys watched Raw on Netflix yesterday, I had planned before Antonio Pierce's firing today, this afternoon, by the Raiders. I had planned on touching on Raw on Netflix and their debut on today's Out of Pocket episode. Instead, we have moved that to Drop the Mic and its 2025 debut tomorrow afternoon at 3. You guys aren't going to want to miss Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast tomorrow at 3, covering Raw on Netflix and that debut. Whether you're a casual, whether you're a new, whether you're a diehard fan, I am going to address each of you tomorrow on the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. But for now, we have your NFL playoff rankings coming in dead last. Technically, I mean, if this was the whole NFL, probably the Raiders would be 32 right now. But it's not. It's the playoffs. Everybody has a chance. Okay, and you're telling me there's a chance. And Walt in here about the Raiders hire Lincoln Riley. I don't know. Now, I don't think Lincoln Riley would have a chance, right? And this is a really good point. Lincoln Riley, for him to make that jump to be a head coach in the NFL for the first time, I think he would want to be at an organization that is going to let him rebuild. Now, Lincoln Riley could go in and, have the 6th overall pick. Maybe they trade up, and if they do, they're giving up draft capital, so that sets them even further back. But before Lincoln Riley could adjust to the NFL, before Lincoln Riley could fully implement what he wants to do, before the Chiefs, Broncos, or Chargers decide, hey, we're not good anymore, Lincoln Riley just wouldn't have enough time with the front office. So, yeah, Lincoln Riley will be a great hire for whoever would get him as a head coach, especially if he had his hand in the NFL. But Lincoln Riley probably would not want to go to the Las Vegas Raiders. And the Burpee Reaper. I never thought I would say that on Out of Pocket, live streaming at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time for you guys. He's actually happy, saying APC. Now, I do want to ask, and this is why we do live streams. Why do you think that Antonio Pierce should have been gone? Because I'm on the opposite end right here. I've also heard from several other Raiders fans that they wanted him to have at least another year or two. So I'm very curious what the Burpee Reaper has to say about Antonio Pierce being fired and why he's actually happy. And who would you rather have? I know Walt right here wanted Lincoln Riley for the team. And Daniel Capps went ahead and said that it doesn't matter who the new head coach will be. If he fails, everybody will call for him to be fired. And Jeremy saying the Browns would be 32. I don't know. That's a solid question. You could put the Browns, you could put the Tennessee Titans, you could put the Raiders. Honestly, after today, the Jacksonville Jaguars wouldn't be so far away from that either. Potentially the Carolina Panthers or the New York Giants. There's a lot of people who fought for. There's a lot of people who fought for the worst team in the NFL. He said he had no brains. I feel like the team fought for him, though. We saw that at the very end of last year. And if he did have brains, I would have at least wanted to see another year out of Antonio Pierce. And Drew Code Sports thought the Browns have a good head coach. Raiders just let their head coach go after one season. Raiders dead last. And that, I honestly don't know how long Kevin Stefanski lasts in Cleveland. And Jeremy, the Raiders offensive coordinator, was the problem. The entire Browns organization is their problem. I'm not going to dispute that. There is a lot of organizational issues with the Cleveland Browns, starting with quarterback. Apparently, Deshaun Watson's coming back, even though, hey, we have a top draft pick. Maybe we should invest it. If Cam Ward is there, number 2, I love Cam Ward more than Shedeur Sanders, by the way. I think that's the first time I've said it on air on Out Pocket, and we're going to cover a lot more of the draft. But it is playoff time, and I got coming at number 14, the Houston Texans. Now, with the Houston Texans, they play the Los Angeles Chargers at home over the playoff picture. The Texans, they beat the Titans. Good job. But you lose to the Chiefs and the Ravens back-to-back weeks and didn't even look competitive with the Baltimore Ravens, and CJ Stroud finishing with a total QBR of 50. I think he regressed from his offensive rookie of the year status. And I feel like Houston overall, with the injuries to Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell, now you're relying on Nico Collins and Joe Mixon. And when this team was retooled, I was like, this is a legitimate threat. And now I look and I'm like, the last quality team you beat was way, way, way earlier in the year. And it was the Buffalo Bills by 3. So I don't foresee the Houston Texans beating a defense like the LA Chargers. And so I have the Houston Texans at 14. And Jeremy, call them old fashioned, but ... cliffhanger. Head coach John Gruden. Wow. Head coach John Gruden, defensive coordinator Dennis Allen, offensive coordinator Norv Turner, and go get JJ McCarthy from Minnesota. By the way, Jeremy just decided, hey, let's take our 3 head coaches from the past 20 years and let's put an entire coaching staff together. Do you know what? That wouldn't be a bad idea if it wasn't the Raiders. John Gruden, Dennis Allen, Norv Turner probably still have a poor taste in their mouth after the Raiders' tenure ended for all of them. But I'm going to be honest. Like, if you put that on any other team, you have John Gruden, Dennis Allen, Norv Turner all working together, and then you go get a young quarterback like J.J. McCarthy. And I want to agree right here. Dennis Allen, a great defensive coordinator, very underrated. I just don't think either of those guys, Gruden, Allen, or Turner, would want to go back to the Raiders organization. That's my only thing with that. But that isn't a bad idea. Coming in at number 13 are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They nearly missed the playoffs, and now they're a 3 seed playing the Washington Commanders, who honestly just had a much better year. Tampa did lose their offensive coordinator, Dave Canales. He went to go coach the Carolina Panthers, and I'll be honest, it's not a bad roster. Baker Mayfield's establishing himself. Mike Evans, one of the greatest wide receivers to ever play this game. They have Bucky Irvin. They have Rachaad White. But when it comes to Tampa Bay, they're 10-7. They won a weaker division, and they rely on the offensive game. If they could get into a shootout, then I have a chance. But the playoffs are a defensive-minded game, and I don't think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers match up well, even though they won their division and they're a 3 seed. But the number 4 seed in the NFC also won their division. The Los Angeles Rams won it by a hair. The Rams were 10-7, and the LA Rams will be hosting the Minnesota Vikings, who could have easily been an NFC North and top 1 or 2 seed. So the Rams, they don't have Aaron Donald. I don't entirely love the Rams defense on that side of the ball. It's about middle of the pack. Their rushing yards, when Kyren Williams is hot, he's hot. When he's not, he's not. And this team really over relies on Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp getting open. Now, before losing the Seahawks, the final game of the year, and, some crazy way gets to still be the NFC West champion. They had went on a string. They beat the Saints. They beat the Bills. They beat the 49ers. They beat the Jets. They beat the Cardinals. In that Bills game, it was a shootout. It's like, wow, this looks like the team that won a Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford. But this team's championship window is closed, and I just don't foresee a Super Bowl in the Rams' future. And I'm gonna butcher this. Be sure to drop the pronunciation if I mess it up, and I will give you a proper shout out. But Egalitarian 207, by the way, not 206. He's better than 206. It's 207. He says he's a Raiders fan and he is disgusted. And I'm not gonna lie, I am disgusted for Raiders Nation right now. For Antonio Pierce being fired by the organization after just 1 year. After just 1 year, fired. Was it a good year? No, by any stretch of the imagination. But egalitarian, I agree. You should be disgusted because this is a cycle for the Las Vegas Raiders. And if they want to be in these top playoff rankings next year, I'm just going to say they're not going to be. But there is a team I didn't expect to be here, even with their new head coach. That's coming in at number 11, the LA Chargers and Jim Harbaugh. Now, I'm going to go ahead and preface, I could have probably put the next 11 to 8. I could have probably put them in any order. And so the Chargers do get the short end of the straw, and I'll tell you why. But the Los Angeles Chargers are 11-6. They finished second in a very difficult AFC West. Okay? That's also another reason why I'm giving a lot of slack to Antonio Pierce like the organization should have done. But they were the best defense in the NFL. Points allowed per game was 17.7. Defense thrives in the playoffs. Okay? They did beat the Broncos a couple weeks ago. They demolished the New England Patriots and made them cry and want to fire their head coach, Gerard Mayo. They beat the Raiders by 2 touchdowns, wanting them to fire Antonio Pierce. But I really do like this Chargers defense, and I like this Chargers head coach. Justin Herbert shown flashes, but I don't trust Justin Herbert as much as a lot of people do. I don't trust him. You look at the offense, and it is ran by Ladd McConkey. And when Ladd McConkey's not going, it's not as effective. The Chargers did sign Ezekiel Elliott this week, but I don't know if that will be enough. And Keith England, that's why Tom Brady was brought in. Now Tom Brady gets to cook with Telesco. Hey, can Tom Brady make a real adjustment? I don't see this going well at all. I just don't see it going well at all because you can't keep changing head coaches if you're the Las Vegas Raiders just like nothing's happening, right? But the Chargers come in at number 11. I love their defense. I don't love what their offense promises. Coming in at number 10, we got their AFC West rival, the Denver Broncos. Denver Broncos, second best defense in the league. They play Buffalo in the opening round in Buffalo. That is not easy. Josh Allen really cut under the turnovers, but the Broncos defense is playing at an all-time high. Bo Nix playing with the confidence that Sean Payton has given him. And I'll be honest, if the Broncos come out to Buffalo, force Josh Allen to go back to his turnover ways and upset Buffalo, then the Broncos have the Kansas City Chiefs, a division rival, that next round. And the Chiefs are going to be tough. They'll be on these top playoff rankings, obviously. They'll be really high, obviously. But the Broncos are in the best position to beat the number 2 and number 1 seed because of their defense and because they have a Super Bowl winning head coach. Now, coming in, Pittsburgh is at number 9. I was back and forth on this. I'm just going to be honest with you. The Pittsburgh Steelers are one of 2 teams in these playoffs who have lost 2 or more games going into the postseason. They started 10-3, and then they dropped their final 4 games against the Eagles, Ravens, Chiefs, Bengals. I'm giving them a little leeway. But the last quality win they had was against Baltimore midseason. They beat the Bengals, they beat the Browns, but you lose to the Eagles, Ravens, Chiefs, all playoff teams, but they didn't seem very competitive either. Russell Wilson not playing his best ball right now. They haven't made a switch back to Justin Fields. I do like Mike Tomlin as a head coach. He's going to put his team, despite the lack of talent on this roster, they overperformed. They excelled expectations. They can pull something out of their rear end. They do go on the road against the Baltimore Ravens. So that will be a toss-up right there, which could really help them. It could really help them advance to the next round, but they do have a long hill ahead of them. Jeremy Schultz, AP was a locker room hire, stopgap solution, save money due to their paying 2 head coaches that are no longer with the team. They only gave the guy a 2-year contract. Is why he could land a decent offensive coordinator, or couldn't land. Jeremy pulling out all the stops right here. And that's the thing. Just let him ride out this second year. Get a guy on the draft, and okay, if it doesn't work out and the team's not improving and the team's regressing, okay, just call it the way it is. But the fact that the Raiders make a decision like this, it feels like they're going to beat the Chargers or the Broncos or the Chiefs, and that's just not reality. And I didn't expect it to be reality that the Washington Commanders would make the playoffs. I have them at number 8. The Commanders are dangerous. They do have Tampa that opening week. Dan Quinn, very notorious from switching from man coverage to zone in last year's Cowboys' embarrassing playoff loss to the Green Bay Packers. I don't foresee Dan Quinn shaking it up and going away from what's worked in Washington this year. Learning from his mistakes. He's got Tampa. I think Dan Quinn's a better coach than Todd Bowles personally. And they are playing at a high level with the confidence of Jaden Daniels. And I'll just be honest. This is a dangerous team you have in Green Bay. And Jeremy, 25 years of losing. AP has not beaten Andy Reid, Sean Payton, and Jim Harbaugh. Gruden can, though. That's debatable with John Gruden, though. We've seen coaches come back into the NFL and just lose a step just because of how the game's evolved. But yeah, he wasn't beating Reid, Payton, or Harbaugh. Is a very difficult position for Antonio Pierce to be in. But come in at number 7, I got the Green Bay Packers. Now, I mentioned the Steelers are the only one of 2 teams to lose multiple games heading into the playoffs, and the Green Bay is the other, losing back-to-back games against the Bears, against the Vikings. I don't know if they entirely tried against the Bears. They lost a heartbreaker by 2 points to the Vikings. Bears needed that win. So I don't fault them, but I do fault them for allowing Christian Watson to get injured. That's a huge loss. But when I look at what makes a team successful, running the football and defense, 19.9 points allowed per game. That's 6th in the NFL. 27 points scored. That's 8th in the NFL. But 5th in rushing yards with 146 yards. Josh Jacobs proved valuable to this team. And that's why I think Green Bay is in my top half of playoff teams. Come in at number 6 is Minnesota. And Jeremy Gruden came up coaching with Andy Reid, though, and he played him well when he came back this last time. That is a good point. I can't argue that. If you can find Andy Reid's kryptonite, I would go with that. Pierce beat the Chiefs, Broncos, and Chargers last season. Drew Code Sports Talk reminds us. Gruden is like an ex. We keep forgetting why it didn't work. AP wasn't the problem. I think Cody's onto something here. It's much bigger than the head coach. And Pat Hurton, they're toast this weekend. He thinks the Green Bay Packers won't win because of their injuries. Green Bay Packers are playing the Eagles, who, if you guys haven't noticed, the Eagles do rank higher than Green Bay in this list. But Minnesota, I have at number 6. Everybody's high on Minnesota. They are just playing unreal. Again, along with Pittsburgh, they have exceeded expectations. Minnesota has. And they're 14-3. And they lost 2 games after starting 5-0 against the Lions and Rams. And then they dropped this game in Detroit hard, 31-9. It just looked uncharacteristic for this team. How far can you trust Sam Darnold? How far can you trust Aaron Jones, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison? How far can you trust this? Also, Brian Flores is taking every interview request. Plans on taking all head coaching interviews. Is Brian Flores already focused on next year? This is what happened to Dallas last year when Dan Quinn was already focused on his next job. And Jeremy replying to Cody, The Chiefs beat themselves in that game, and it did work with Gruen. He had them on a playoff trajectory. He liked AP as a gamble, but he came up craps, unfortunately. If you've never played that game, it's a fun game. But I do have Minnesota at 6, just seeing, hey, there's a lot better teams. Slay it up. Buffalo, I have at 5. They do play Denver. There is an upset alert, but Josh Allen has cleaned up turnovers. If he can continue to do that, the sky could be the limit for Buffalo. Amari Cooper could help. James Cook is the difference maker, keeping the ball on the ground. Baltimore at 4. And by the way, Jason saying, Sam, I am never been in a playoff game. He was just in one against the Lions. He folded like a cheap suit. Teams have a blueprint to pressure and beat Minnesota. And that's why I don't have Minnesota rated higher than Buffalo or rated higher than Baltimore. You guys, if you have been watching Out of Pocket for the last 4 months, I hated that Derrick Henry joined the Baltimore Ravens and Dallas didn't pursue him. Because you have Derrick Henry, you have Lamar. Lamar is playing better this year than he did for his MVP year last season. And for that reason, Baltimore on a 4-game win streak, beat the Giants, yeah, easy. Beat the Steelers, a playoff team. Beat the Texans outright, a playoff team. And then just showed Cleveland, hey, we're not rolling over for anybody. And we're not overlooking anybody. This team started 0-2, and then they went on a run. Cowboys, Bills, Bengals, Commanders, Buccaneers. They are just on a different level. They do have a tough division matchup against Pittsburgh, and that could cost them. But I do see Baltimore at number 4 and a legitimate threat. And if you haven't noticed, I do have them as my second favorite AFC team. But my second favorite NFC team is the Detroit Lions. Everybody's going to get on to me for this because I still have Detroit pretty low. They're a 1 seed in these playoffs, right? They're a 1 seed. They should be good, you know? They've won 3 straight. They're 15-2. There's no team hotter. You got Jared Goff. You got Jahmyr Gibbs. They're the first in points per game. They're second in passing yards. They're 6th in rushing yards. They're 7th in points allowed. Like, what can't you like about this team? Dan Campbell. Players want to play for Dan Campbell, but they will not like his risk taken in the playoffs because we saw this ruin him last year, and it could very well ruin him this year. This Detroit team is talented. They have players across the board. A couple are hurt. Aiden Hutchinson being one of them. That's a big blow. But Detroit's not the healthiest. They played well. But come on, guys. Dan Campbell is going to get a headline on Out of Pocket and on sports media worldwide because he will cost Detroit the opportunity to be in the Super Bowl because, unfortunately, I think this team could be the favorites to go to the Super Bowl. And Jeremy saying, would love to see this Lions team win a Super Bowl. They would be the first real, actual, gritty team to win in about 20 years or so. Dan Campbell deserves it. He's done a great job turning that team around, but I do think his gambling will be hard. You got to know when to hold him, know when to fold him, know when to walk away, know when to run. He's going to count his money when he's sitting at the table, and it's just not going to be enough. Really, Dan Campbell going to come bite your kneecaps out. Hey, my kneecaps are here. Come at him. Cut at him, Dan Campbell. Okay? Because you're going to cost this team the opportunity to be in the Super Bowl again. And Drew Code Sports Talk, Jeremy, I get Gruen did well this season. He has let go. Maybe we get in the playoffs, but in my opinion, the Raiders organization is still the issue, and I totally agree with Cody. Philly is a big rival of mine, obviously being a Cowboys fan, but I'm going to be honest. This team knows how to do it. They have A.J. Brown. They have Devontae Smith. They have Jalen Hurts, who doesn't have to do it all because they have a MVP caliber candidate in Saquon Barkley, who should have had the Russian record. Now, he didn't. He had a week off, and now the Philadelphia Eagles play the Green Bay Packers, who are hurting themselves, but the Eagles are one of the most healthy teams in the NFL. And Drew Code Sports Talk, Jason is wild today. I agree with that. He's always wild. But Philadelphia, as the number 2 seed, the only other place they'd have to play is Detroit, which is indoors, which they could very well do. But teams don't want to go to Philadelphia and play. Grant, it does help. Green Bay is accustomed to the cold. But you look at other teams. Tampa, a warm weather team. Rams, warm weather team. Vikings, just not as good. And the Commanders would play the Detroit Lions first. And if they did beat the Detroit Lions, I still think the Eagles are a better team than the Washington Commanders. So Philly, they have a pretty clear path to the Super Bowl. But guys, we might as well end the show here because your back-to-back Super Bowl champions make history with a three-peat representing the AFC in the Super Bowl. And guys, I told you throughout the season, even if the Chiefs lost, they'd be number 1 in my top quarter rankings, and that did not change. That didn't change. I told you guys, this wasn't changing. The Kansas City Chiefs are 15-2, only because they rested all their stars against the Denver Broncos last week on the road, and their only loss came to the Bills on the road, who usually have their number in the regular season. This Chiefs team is hungry. This Chiefs team is motivated. And until otherwise, they are the best team in the NFL. Whether you like it, whether you don't like it, you must respect that the Kansas City Chiefs are the best team in the NFL, the best team in the playoffs. And I'm sorry, but if you don't see that, you're blind. You're blind. And guys, that will be our episode for Outta Pocket today. Want to give shout outs. Jason, read a couple comments. Commanders and Bucks better than the Packers. Next year, I want to go head to head with your rankings. Yeah, but your rankings are going to be terrible, Jason. It's just going to be terrible. Jeremy, shout out Jeremy. Been watching the entire show, talking Raiders, talking these top quarter rankings for the playoffs. KC has been pretty weak this year. Their record this year is not representative of their quality of play this year. Dare I say the referees have been very, very kind to them. This is where I differ. And I've said this for weeks, Jeremy. A champion will win one-score games because there's a lot of one-score games in the playoffs. We've seen this with defending Super Bowl champions before. We've seen this with teams who have went back-to-back championships, either in the NFL, NBA, so on and so forth. They will coast a little bit in the regular season, knowing when it comes to the matter at hand, they'll show up. And that is why I think Kansas City is great. Because when it did get to those one-score games, they pulled it out. They pulled it out. And I think they will still do it. Drew Code Sports Talk, thank you. He's saying Eagles or Lions. And I'm slightly favoring the Eagles over the Lions, even though coaching-wise, I would take Dan Campbell over Nick Sirianni, but in the playoffs, I don't like Dan Campbell's gambling. Shout out Jeremy and Jason. And shout out Drew Code Sports Talk. Appreciate you, my friend. I'm sorry you're a Raiders fan. He says, I don't know, man. Mahomes was pretty human this year. It's far from in the bag. I think, hey, just come back to me in a month when the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl yet again. And I can't pick against them. They're the new Patriots. They're the new Tom Brady. If you see the Mahomes, and if you see the Chiefs in the playoffs, you can't bet against them. And if you do, oh well. But until then, I'm not going to bet against them, even if I'm really high on Baltimore or Buffalo, if Josh Allen can cut down the turnovers. But guys, that is our episode. I want to say shout out to all the people talking. Drew Code Sports Talk, Daniel Caps, Walt, Jeremy, the Burpee Reaper, Egalitarian, Keith England, Drew Code Sports Talk, Jason Colenso from 3 from Deep. We had a huge panel and huge guests. I gave other guests a day off, but if this is your first time joining us, we are going to cover a lot of the head coaching stuff as Outta Pocket and Boom Broadcasting continues. So if you guys enjoyed this live sports stream, just hit subscribe. And if you're already subscribed, that should notify you when we're live. But go ahead and send this link to a friend so that we can continue growing. We can continue creating content that you guys enjoy, and we can continue having these conversations like we've had in the comments today. But guys, I am over my time because I have a long way away from Jerry's not betting against the Chiefs. They're definitely the league's new chosen team, just saying the Eagles and Lions will be a major challenge. And if that's the Super Bowl. And if there's one team who's done it in the Super Bowl and proved it, it's the Kansas City Chiefs. And shout out Michael Davis. This guy, I know several Michael Davises, just FYI. But guys, I appreciate y'all. No, you are the ones. You are the ones who rock. Let me know who your favorite team in the playoffs is. And guys, we will be back not Thursday unless we do a pre-recorded on Thursday. I will be out of town at the Weight Room Revival in Matthews, North Carolina. It's a free event if you guys want to join me and you're around the area. But Outta Pocket will for sure be back on Friday. And 5280 Jaeger. Hey, man, that gentleman can come coach the Broncos linebackers any of the day of the week. He's more than welcome here in Denver. Ooh, that would be... Could you imagine Antonio Pierce going? Antonio Pierce going to coach the Broncos linebackers and just stick it to the Raiders fans? That would be the worst for Raiders fans. But guys, I appreciate y'all so much. Thank you. Subscribe so we can see you guys back here on Friday. And we have a lot more content for you on Boom Broadcasting available on demand. Just go find your favorite NBA podcast, MLB podcast, previous live sports streams like Outta Pocket yesterday covering more coaching changes and so much more. My wrestling podcast tomorrow talking about Raw on Netflix. That will drop, the Drop the Mic Wrestling podcast. But guys, until next time, everyone have a great evening.
Well, that's it. I really hope you enjoyed it. We had a ball making it. Thank you very much.